Welcome to our deep dive today on triathlon training.
Oh, this should be fun.
We're going to be taking a look at the Triathlete's Training Bible.
Great book.
I'm really excited to kind of get into it and figure out how we can all swim, bike, and run like champions.
It's kind of a fascinating topic, you know. There's
Absolutely.
a lot of science to it.
Yeah.
There's also, a bit of art.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking about kind of both today.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because this book, whether you're a total newbie or you've been racing for years, it really has something for everyone,
It does. It's for all
which
levels.
is really cool.
And they really emphasize that the most important thing is having like a systematic approach to training,
I like that.
you know?
Makes sense.
It's almost like building a house, you know? You need to make sure you have a good foundation before you put on the walls and the roof.
So the first brick that we lay, according to the book, is a clearly defined objective.
Right.
And they say it's not enough to simply want to be faster.
Yeah.
How do we make this goal a little bit more concrete?
Well, I think that comes down to specifics.
Okay.
You have to ask yourself, how much faster do I want to be, by when, and in what races?
Almost like you're programming your GPS for a destination.
Yeah,
You need those precise coordinates.
exactly.
But the book also talks about mental fitness.
Oh, this is important.
What role does our mind play in a sport that seems so physically demanding?
So much of it is mental.
Right.
Things like visualization are incredibly powerful.
Okay.
Even when the conditions are tough, just picturing yourself succeeding can really build mental resilience.
I can see that.
And that's going to help you push through, those difficult moments that every athlete inevitably faces.
So we're training our mind as much as our body.
Exactly.
Okay, now, how does the science of training fit into all of this?
Oh, yeah.
I know the book mentions something called lactate threshold.
It does.
And I'll be honest, I don't really know what that is.
So lactate threshold, or LT, it's basically the point where your body starts producing more lactic acid than it can remove.
Okay.
And it's really important because that determines your training zones.
So how do we figure out what our lactate threshold is?
So there are a few different ways to test for it.
Okay,
But the main point is that, if you train too hard, you're going to risk injuring yourself.
of course.
But if you train too easy, you're not going to reach your full potential.
So it's about finding that sweet spot.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
You got to find that balance.
I like that.
But of course, training isn't just about running at a certain pace. There are different types of training.
Right.
You've got your endurance training,
Okay.
force training, speed skills.
The force training is interesting to me
Interesting.
because I just think of like pure muscle building.
Well, I mean, it is about, building the muscles that help you overcome resistance,
Okay.
which is important for things like climbing hills or sprinting. But it's not just about brute force.
Okay.
It's about technique, too,
Okay.
so that you can be as efficient as possible.
Makes me think about those like rock climbers that just
Yeah.
like glide up the wall.
Yes.
It looks effortless. They're not just strong, but they're also using that strength.
You're using it efficiently, exactly.
That is it.
And then another important concept that the book talks about is periodization.
No, I don't know this one either.
So periodization is basically, cycling through different periods of training throughout the year.
Okay.
So you might have a period of high volume, then a period of high intensity, then a period of recovery.
So it's not just doing the same thing all the time.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
almost like an orchestra. You know how an orchestra has different movements in a symphony? Each one contributes to the overall piece,
Right.
but it has a different tempo and feel.
I like that.
So in the same way, periodization helps you to build different types of fitness
That makes sense.
at different times of the year.
Yeah.
So that you're peaking when it matters most.
Right on race day.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So it's all about being strategic with your training.
Now, I know the book also talks a bit about nutrition.
Of course, that's incredibly important.
And I'm interested to hear what they say because I know that there's a lot of different opinions out there
Oh, absolutely.
about what athletes should and shouldn't be eating.
You hear all kinds of things, but this book really emphasizes that it's all about balance.
Okay.
You need lean protein, you need healthy fats, and you need the right kinds of carbohydrates.
What do they say about preparing for race week?
Well, the main focus is on minimizing digestive distress. The last thing you want is to have stomach problems on race day.
Right.
So they recommend sticking to familiar foods that are easy to digest.
That makes sense.
You want to reduce your fiber intake to avoid bloating.
Okay.
And, of course, you want to stay properly hydrated, but without overdoing it.
So it's all about being mindful and listening to your body. Okay, now let's talk about efficiency in each of the three sports?
All right, let's break it down.
Swimming, cycling, and running.
Sounds good.
What are some of the key points that the book makes about mastering each of these?
So starting the swimming, the big thing is to reduce drag.
Drag.
Yeah, the resistance you encounter as you move through the water.
Okay.
And to do that, you need to streamline your body position
I
and
see.
develop a long, smooth stroke.
So it's almost like we're trying to be like dolphins,
That's a great way to think about it.
effortlessly gliding through the water.
Yeah, it's the goal.
Now, the book also mentions specific drills to help improve our swimming technique.
It does, because you can always improve.
I never thought about that, like specific exercises for swimming.
Oh, yeah, they can be really effective.
Okay.
For cycling, the biggest thing is to have a proper bike fit.
I can see that
How you're positioned on the bike can make a huge difference.
in terms of,
Your comfort, your power, your efficiency.
right, it's like wearing a suit. If it doesn't fit properly, it's going to be uncomfortable.
Then you're not going to perform your best.
Exactly.
So they talk about things like adjusting your cleat position, your saddle height, handlebar reach.
So we're tailoring it to our body.
Exactly. It should feel like an extension of yourself.
I like that.
And then for running, the big focus is on cadence.
Cadence?
Yes, that's the number of steps you take per minute.
Okay.
And they recommend aiming for a cadence of around 90 steps per minute or higher,
Why is that?
because it improves your efficiency and it actually reduces the impact on your joints.
So it's not just about how fast your legs are moving.
Right.
It's about how often they're moving.
And how efficiently they're moving.
I see.
So they talk about things like foot landing, how your foot strikes the ground.
Okay.
They recommend a mid-foot strike because it helps with shock absorption.
So we're not pounding the pavement as hard.
Exactly. You want to be light on your feet.
Okay, I'm starting to notice a theme here.
What's that?
It seems like with all three sports, it's not just about working harder, it's about working smarter.
I think you're right on the money with that one.
Interesting. And it looks like they go into more detail about strength training
They do.
and how that can kind of help us prevent injuries and enhance our performance.
It can make a huge difference.
And they advocate for like a periodized approach to strength training.
Right. So just like with your other training, you want to change your focus throughout the year,
Okay.
depending on what phase of training you're in.
That makes sense?
You wouldn't lift the same weights for every single workout.
Right, right.
And it's interesting because they really emphasize that quality is more important than quantity.
Okay.
So, you're better off doing a few exercises with perfect form
Right.
than trying to do a ton of exercises and sacrificing your form.
What about stretching?
Stretching is crucial.
I always forget about it until my muscles are already hurting.
I know it's easy to overlook,
Right.
but it's so important for flexibility and preventing injuries.
What kind of stretches do they recommend?
Well, they have a whole section on it with specific stretches for different muscle groups.
Okay.
And they emphasize that, it's important to listen to your body
Of course.
and don't push yourself too far.
So it's all about building a strong, resilient body.
Exactly.
Okay. Now this is interesting.
What is it?
The book mentions individual variations,
Right.
like how gender, age, and experience can affect our training needs.
Well, everyone is different.
Makes sense.
So they actually provide guidance for different types of athletes.
Okay.
They talk about training for women, for masters athletes, for juniors.
It's cool that they acknowledge everyone's unique journey.
Definitely.
Now let's shift gears a bit.
All right. What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about fueling our performance and enhancing recovery.
The all-important topic of nutrition.
I'm ready to learn how what we eat translates to how we race.
Well, it's a fascinating topic, actually.
Okay.
The book goes into the history of dietary recommendations for athletes.
Interesting.
And it's really interesting to see how our understanding of sports nutrition has evolved over time.
What are some of the key takeaways from that?
Well, one thing that's really interesting is the comeback of protein.
Okay.
For a while, fat was kind of demonized.
Right.
And protein was seen as the most important nutrient for athletes.
I could see why.
But now we're starting to understand that fat plays a really important role, too.
Makes sense.
Especially for endurance activities like triathlons.
So it's not about avoiding fat altogether.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
It's about choosing the right kinds of fat, like olive oil, nuts, fatty fish.
So it's about choosing the right fuel for the job.
Exactly.
Now, what about carbohydrates?
So carbs are still the primary energy source for our muscles,
Right.
but it's important to choose the right kinds of carbs.
Okay.
They talk about something called the glycemic index.
Glycemic index.
Yeah, it basically measures how quickly carbs raise your blood sugar levels.
Okay.
So you want to focus on low glycemic index carbs.
Which would be?
Things like whole grains, fruits,
Oh,
vegetables,
wait.
things that are going to give you sustained energy.
Instead of that sugar rush and crash.
Exactly.
They also mentioned iron, right?
They do. Iron's really important for oxygen transport and energy production.
And I imagine if you're deficient in iron, you're going to feel pretty fatigued.
Oh, absolutely. It
Yeah.
can really impact your performance.
So they recommend making sure we're getting enough iron in our diet.
Exactly.
And what kinds of foods have iron in them?
So good sources of iron include things like red meat, leafy green vegetables, beans.
I'll have to keep that in mind.
It's all about giving your body the nutrients it needs to function at its best.
Now, how do these dietary choices specifically enhance our training and racing?
Well, they emphasize the importance of timing.
Timing.
Yeah, when you eat is just as important as what you eat.
Okay.
So they talk about different fueling strategies for different stages of training and recovery.
Like I wouldn't eat the same thing before a workout that I would after a workout.
Exactly. So they break it down into 5 stages.
5 stages.
Yeah, starting with pre-workout nutrition
Right?
to make sure you have enough energy to power through your workout.
Makes sense.
Then there's during workout nutrition,
Okay.
which is all about maintaining your blood sugar levels and preventing fatigue.
Okay, so what would we eat during a workout?
Usually, easily digestible carbohydrates are best.
Okay, so things that are easy on the stomach.
Exactly.
Then we've got immediately after workout.
Right, so this is when it's crucial to replenish your glycogen stores.
Glycogen.
Yeah, it's basically the stored form of glucose in your muscle.
Okay.
And you also want to provide your body with protein for muscle repair.
That makes sense.
Then there's between workouts,
Yeah.
where it's all about having a balanced intake of protein, fat, and carbs to support recovery.
So it's like we're giving our body the building blocks it needs to get stronger.
Exactly.
Okay, and then finally,
Everyday fueling. Just making sure you're eating a healthy, balanced diet to support your overall health and well-being.
that's important.
It's the foundation of everything.
Now, what about race week nutrition?
So during race week, the focus is on consistency.
Consistency.
Yeah, you don't want to make any drastic changes to your diet.
Right, that could upset our stomach.
Exactly. You want to stick to familiar foods, reduce your fiber intake, and maintain proper hydration.
So no crazy experiments right before the big day.
Exactly. Stick to what you know works for you.
And what about actually fueling during the race?
So during the race, it's all about maintaining your energy levels and hydration.
Makes sense.
So they recommend a mix of carbohydrates and electrolytes.
Okay.
And they actually provide specific recommendations for Ironman distance races.
Wow, that's going above and beyond.
It's a tough race. You need to be prepared.
And then I imagine after the race, we're focusing on replenishing those fluids and electrolytes.
Exactly. You need to rehydrate and refuel to kickstart recovery.
Okay, now let's talk about gaining a competitive edge.
Ooh, getting into the nitty-gritty here.
Are we talking about secret training techniques?
Not quite secrets, but they do discuss ergogenic aids.
Ergogenic aids, those are things like caffeine and creatine, right?
Exactly. Substances or practices that can enhance performance.
Okay.
But they emphasize that individual responses vary widely.
So what works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And they also caution against relying too heavily on ergogenic aids.
Right.
They're not a substitute for consistent training, good nutrition, and proper recovery.
So there are no shortcuts to greatness.
There's no shortcuts. You've got to put in the work.
Okay, lastly, they recommend keeping a detailed training diary.
This is a really valuable tool.
I've tried that in the past.
Yeah.
Sometimes I struggle to stay consistent with it.
It can be tough.
But what makes it so valuable?
Well, think of it as a record of your journey.
Okay.
You're documenting your progress, your challenges, your insights.
So what should we be tracking?
So you want to track your workouts, your perceived effort, your recovery markers,
Anything else?
and even things like your mood and energy levels.
So we're really tuning into how our body is feeling.
Exactly. It's all about self-awareness.
Okay, and how does analyzing this data help us?
Well, it can help you to identify trends and patterns
Okay.
so that you can make better decisions about your training.
It's like becoming your own data analyst.
Exactly. You're taking control of your own training.
Well, I feel like we've really gone deep here.
We have covered a lot of ground.
This has been an incredible deep dive unpacking a wealth of knowledge from the Triathlete's Training Bible.
It's a fantastic resource for any triathlete.
But this is just the beginning, right?
Oh,
This
absolutely.
information is just a starting point.
The real journey is in applying this knowledge to your own training.
Exactly.
So experiment, analyze, adapt, and never stop learning.
And of course, we need to remember to enjoy the process.
The journey is just as important as the destination. So celebrate your achievements, embrace the setbacks, and never lose sight of the joy of pushing your limits.
It's all about finding that balance between passion and discipline.
Beautifully said.
Now, let's recap the key takeaways from this deep dive, shall we?
Absolutely.
And we're going to distill them into a nice, concise 10-point summary.
Okay, I'm ready.
So point number 1,
Goal setting is key.
we need to define specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound objectives for our training.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Point number 2,
Mental fitness matters.
we need to cultivate confidence, visualize success, and embrace a positive mindset.
So important.
Point number 3,
Science informs art.
we need to understand the physiological principles behind training,
Yes.
but we also need to personalize our approach.
Everyone is different.
Point number 4,
Intensity is crucial.
train at the right level of effort,
That's key.
using heart rate and perceived exertion to guide you.
Makes sense.
Point number 5,
Periodization is power.
strategically cycle through high volume, high intensity, and recovery periods.
A great way to keep your body guessing.
Point number 6,
Fuel for performance.
we need to focus on a balanced diet with lean protein, healthy fats, and the right carbohydrates.
The building blocks of a healthy body.
Point number 7,
Master efficiency.
small tweaks in technique can lead to significant improvements in speed and endurance.
It's all about those marginal gains.
Point number 8,
Rest and recover smartly.
we need to prioritize sleep, stretching, massage, and active recovery.
To prevent injury and burnout.
So true.
You can't train hard if you're always injured.
Point number 9,
Individualize your approach.
experiment with different training methods, nutrition strategies, and recovery techniques to find what works best for you.
It's a journey of self-discovery.
And finally, point number 10,
Embrace lifelong learning.
triathlon training is a journey of continuous improvement.
You're always learning and growing.
Stay curious, explore new ideas, and strive for peak performance throughout your athletic career.
Sounds like a plan.
Now you have the knowledge to crush those races.
Go get them. Now, let's dig deeper into this idea of limiters.
Limiters, okay.
The book really encourages athletes to kind of, look at their strengths and weaknesses
Like that's
in each of the disciplines,
right.
recognizing that, certain areas might need a little bit more attention than others.
It's like finding the cog in the machine that needs a little oil.
Exactly, a perfect analogy. And that's where this personalized training really comes in.
Right, because we all have different starting points,
Of course.
different areas for growth.
And, while you're working on those weaknesses, don't forget to leverage your strengths as well.
Okay, so play to our strengths.
Absolutely. It's all about recognizing that, becoming well-rounded,
Takes time.
it takes
You
time.
don't have to be perfect in every area right away.
Right. And that's where performance testing comes in.
Performance testing, that's
Yeah,
right.
because it allows you to track your progress and identify, where you've improved, where you need to work a little bit more.
It's like having a personal dashboard
It is.
that gives us real-time feedback on our journey.
I like that.
Now, the book recommended, I remember, specific tests for each sport.
Right. So you can get some objective data.
I see, to really see where we're at.
Exactly. But it's not just about the numbers. They also emphasize, listening to your body.
Okay?
How do you feel?
Yeah.
Are you feeling any pain?
Make adjustments as needed.
It's about that self-awareness,
I like that.
tuning into those signals that your body is giving you.
Now, the book also talks about safety, particularly when it comes to cycling.
Oh, yeah, that's incredibly important.
I mean, makes sense.
Of course.
You're sharing the road with vehicles.
You're out there, you're exposed.
So what kind of advice do they give?
Well, they say, avoid heavily trafficked routes whenever possible.
Okay,
Always wear a helmet.
of course.
And if you can, ride with a group that prioritizes safety.
Strength in numbers.
It can make a big difference.
And also, if something doesn't feel right,
Right.
like physically,
Listen to your body.
don't hesitate to seek medical attention.
Absolutely. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Okay, now let's talk about volume
Volume.
and how that plays into training.
So they make a distinction between duration which is the length of a single workout,
Okay.
and volume, which takes into account both the duration and the frequency.
So it's like the difference between um,
What would be a good analogy?
like a single brushstroke
Oh.
versus a completed painting.
Exactly. And when you combine volume with intensity,
Okay.
you get workload.
Okay, workload. So that seems like a comprehensive measure
It
of
is.
our training efforts.
Right. It's the total amount of stress you're putting on your body.
And how do we know what an appropriate workload is?
Well, it depends. The athlete's experience, fitness level, and age.
Again, there's no one size fits all.
Exactly.
And then we've got the overload principle.
Right. So this is the idea of pushing your body beyond its comfort zone
Makes sense.
so that it can adapt and improve.
It's like gradually increasing the weight you lift.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To build muscle.
That's a great example, but you have to be careful
About.
not overloading too quickly or too frequently.
Okay, so it's that balance again.
Finding that sweet spot.
Now they even provide a table illustrating the changes
Interesting.
that occur when training is paused.
Right, because life happens.
It does. So how do we stay consistent even amidst those disruptions?
Well, even if you can't stick to your regular training schedule,
Right.
it's important to find ways to stay active.
Got it.
Any movement is better than no movement.
Okay, now I'm intrigued by this concept of tapering.
Tapering.
It's basically reducing our workload before a race,
Right, so that you can be fully recovered and ready to perform your best on race day.
like sharpening a blade
Exactly.
before a crucial task.
And they suggest a gradual reduction in volume,
Okay.
but maintaining intensity. So we're not just taking it easy,
No, you still want to keep those systems firing.
but we are giving our body a chance to rest.
Exactly.
Now, what about pre-race prep?
Pre-race prep is all about mental readiness.
Okay, so it's more than just like packing our bags.
It's about getting your mind right.
I see.
So they recommend things like visualizing success,
Okay,
reviewing your race plan,
right.
and minimizing any potential stressors.
So that we arrive at the starting line feeling calm and collected.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about the three abilities
The three abilities, all right?
that the book outlines as the foundation of triathlon success.
These are the building blocks.
Endurance, force, and speed skills.
Those are the ones.
Let's break each of those down.
Sounds good.
So first up, we have endurance.
Endurance, the ability to sustain effort over time.
That seems pretty crucial for,
For a triathlon.
yeah, especially Ironman distances.
Absolutely. And they explain how endurance training works.
How so?
Well, it strengthens your slow twitch muscle fibers. It improves your body's ability to use fat for fuel.
Interesting.
And it enhances your cardiovascular system.
So we're building a powerful engine.
That can keep going and going.
And then we've got force.
Force, the ability to overcome resistance.
That seems important for, like, hill climbs and sprints.
Absolutely.
Just that raw power to push through.
But it's not just about brute strength.
Right, because we talked about technique being important, too.
Technique is crucial.
So it's not just how strong we are.
It's how we apply that strength.
A blend of physical ability and skillful execution.
Precisely.
And then speed skills.
Speed skills, the ability to move quickly and efficiently.
It seems pretty self-explanatory.
It does, but they actually dive into the biomechanics of movement.
Biomechanics.
Yeah, how our bodies move.
Okay.
And they explain how even small adjustments in form can make a big difference.
That's fascinating that even subtle things can have such a significant impact.
It's all about efficiency.
Now, going back to limiters,
Limiters, right?
the book encourages us to, use those tools like performance tests and self-assessment.
Right, to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses lie.
Okay, so figuring out those weak links in the chain.
Exactly, because that's going to help you to create a more targeted training plan.
Focus our efforts where they'll have the biggest impact.
And again, leverage your strengths while you're working on your weaknesses.
A good reminder that we don't need to be perfect at everything right away.
Right. It's a journey.
Now, let's talk about maximizing efficiency.
Maximizing efficiency.
Specifically in each of the three sports.
Let's break it down.
Starting with swimming.
All right, swimming, the big thing here is to minimize drag.
Drag, okay.
That resistance you encounter as you move through the water.
Right.
The best way to do that is to streamline your body position
Makes sense.
and develop a long, smooth stroke,
We're trying to be like those dolphins again.
effortlessly gliding through the water.
They also recommend specific drills for swimming,
They do.
which I think is really interesting.
It can be very helpful.
I never really thought about that before.
Yeah. But targeted exercises can really help you to improve your technique.
Okay, now for cycling.
Cycling, the key here is a proper bike fit.
Bike fit. Okay.
Yeah, your position on the bike is crucial. Your
That
comfort, your power output, your efficiency.
That's like having, you know, properly fitting running shoes.
Exactly. You don't want blisters slowing you down.
And they provide specific instructions on how to adjust our bike fit.
They do. They talk about cleat position, saddle height, handlebar reach.
It's like tailoring a suit.
It should feel like an extension of yourself.
Okay. And what about running?
Running, the big focus is on cadence.
Cadence. Okay.
Remember, that's the number of steps you take per minute.
Right. Yeah. Right.
They recommend aiming for 90 steps per minute or higher.
And why is that?
It improves your efficiency
Okay.
and reduces the impact on your joints.
I see. So it's not just about how fast our legs are moving.
Right.
It's about how efficiently they're moving.
And they talk about foot landing,
Foot landing.
how your foot strikes the ground.
Okay.
They recommend a midfoot strike.
Midfoot strike.
It helps with shock absorption.
So we're landing softly.
Exactly, light on your feet.
And they recommend specific drills for running as well.
They do. Drills can really help to improve both your form and your cadence,
It's like we're training our nervous system.
to move in a more efficient way.
I like that. Now, what about strength and flexibility training?
So strength and flexibility are crucial for enhancing performance
Yeah.
and preventing injuries.
Makes sense. They're like the foundation
They are.
upon which we build everything else.
Exactly. And they recommend a periodized approach to strength training,
Periodized. Okay.
just like with your other training,
I see.
changing your focus throughout the year.
Okay, so what kind of exercises do they recommend?
They have a whole section on it with detailed instructions.
Sounds thorough.
It is, but the main thing is to make sure you're using proper form,
Of course.
quality over quantity.
And they also emphasize the importance of flexibility.
Stretching is crucial.
What kind of stretches do they recommend?
Well, they have specific stretches for different muscle groups
Okay.
to improve your range of motion and prevent muscle imbalances.
So we're keeping our body supple and resilient.
Exactly, so it can handle the demands of training and racing.
We've covered so much,
We have.
from goal setting to training techniques to maximizing efficiency.
It's all connected.
Now, before we move on to nutrition,
Okay,
I want to touch on one more point.
what's that?
The book talks about individual variations.
Individual variations.
As gender, age, experience
Everyone is different.
can affect our training needs.
And they actually provide guidance for different types of athletes.
That's great.
Women, masters athletes, juniors.
Like, they recognize that everyone's journey is unique.
Exactly, there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Now let's dive into the world of sports nutrition.
The fuel that powers our performance.
I'm ready to unlock the secrets of optimal fueling.
All right, let's get into it.
How can we fuel our body for peak performance and enhance our recovery?
Well, the book takes a fascinating approach. They delve into the history of dietary recommendations for athletes.
Interesting.
You know, it's really interesting to see how our understanding of sports nutrition has evolved.
I can imagine there have been some pretty significant shifts.
There have been, for example, the comeback of protein.
Okay, protein's making a comeback.
It is, you know, for a while, fat was demonized.
Right, it was the enemy.
But now we're starting to understand that fat plays a really important role.
Especially for endurance athletes.
Absolutely. It provides sustained energy.
So it's not about avoiding fat altogether.
No, it's about choosing the right kinds of fat.
What do they recommend?
Things like olive oil, nuts, fatty fish.
Okay, healthy fats.
And of course, we can't forget about carbohydrates.
Carbs, the fuel that keeps us going.
Exactly. They're the primary energy source for our muscles.
So how do we choose the right carbs?
They introduced this concept of the glycemic index.
Glycemic index, okay.
It measures how quickly different carbs raise your blood sugar.
So it's like a ranking system for carbs.
Yeah, in a way it is.
And we want to focus on low glycemic index carbs.
Exactly. Things that are going to give you sustained energy,
Right.
whole grains, fruits, vegetables.
Okay, so those are the good carbs.
And they talk about iron as well.
Iron.
Yeah, it's essential for oxygen transport and energy production.
I imagine if we're deficient in iron, we're going to feel pretty fatigued.
Absolutely. It can have a big impact on your performance.
What are some good sources of iron?
So red meat, leafy green vegetables, beans are all good sources.
So it's really interesting how the food we eat
Right.
directly impacts our athletic potential.
It all comes back to nutrition.
Now, how do these dietary choices specifically enhance our training and racing?
Well, timing is crucial.
Timing, okay.
When you eat is just as important as what you eat.
So we're not just eating whatever, whenever.
No, you need different fueling strategies for
Right.
different stages of training and recovery.
Yeah. That makes sense. I thought I wouldn't eat the same thing before a workout as after.
Exactly. So they break it down into 5 stages.
5 stages.
First, you have pre-workout nutrition.
Fueling up before we hit the road.
Exactly. You need to make sure you have enough energy.
Then, during workout nutrition.
Right, to maintain your blood sugar and prevent fatigue.
So what kind of things would we be eating during a workout?
Usually, easily digestible carbs are best.
Okay, easy on the stomach.
Then immediately after your workout,
Okay.
it's crucial to replenish your glycogen stores and provide protein for muscle repair.
Refueling and repairing.
Exactly.
Then between workouts.
You want a balanced intake of protein, fat, and carbohydrates.
To support recovery.
And prepare for your next training session.
It's like giving our body the building blocks.
It needs to grow stronger.
And then finally.
Everyday fueling.
Okay.
Making sure you're eating a healthy diet overall.
The foundation of it all.
Exactly.
Now, what about race week nutrition?
So during race week, the focus is on consistency. Consistency.
Don't make any drastic changes to your diet.
Okay, so no crazy experiments right before the big day.
Exactly. You want to minimize any potential digestive issues.
Makes sense. So what should we be eating?
Stick to familiar foods.
Okay.
Reduce your fiber intake.
Okay.
And stay hydrated.
But not overhydrated.
Right. You want to find that balance.
And on race morning.
A light, easily digestible breakfast.
A few hours before the start.
Exactly.
Now what about fueling during the race itself?
So during the race, you need to maintain your energy and hydration.
It makes sense.
So they recommend a mix of carbohydrates and electrolytes.
Okay.
And they even provide specific recommendations for Ironman distances.
Because it's such a long race.
It's a unique challenge.
And then after the race.
Replenishes those fluids and electrolytes.
To kickstart recovery.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's talk about gaining that competitive edge.
Competitive edge.
What are some strategies for really taking our performance to the next level?
Well, they talk about ergogenic aids. Ergogenic aids, I've heard of those.
Things like caffeine, creatine,
Right.
substances or practices that can enhance performance.
Okay, so what's the deal with them?
Well, they can be helpful,
Okay.
but it's important to remember that everyone responds differently.
So what works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And they also caution against relying too heavily on ergogenic aids.
Okay.
They're not a substitute for the fundamentals.
Right. So consistent training, good nutrition, proper recovery.
Those are the foundations of success.
No shortcuts.
No shortcuts.
And lastly, they recommend keeping a training diary.
Ah, the training diary.
I've tried it in the past.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to stay consistent.
It can be, but it's a valuable tool.
What makes it so valuable?
It's a record of your journey.
Okay.
You're tracking your progress, your challenges, your insights,
So what should we be tracking?
your workouts,
Okay.
your perceived effort, your recovery markers,
Anything else?
even things like your mood and energy levels.
So we're really getting in tune with our body.
Exactly. It's about self-awareness.
And how does analyzing all this data help us?
It helps you to identify trends and patterns so you can make more informed decisions about your training.
So it's like we're becoming our own coaches.
In a way, you are.
This has been amazing.
This has been a deep dive.
We've uncovered so much from the Triathlete's Training Bible,
A wealth of information.
from the fundamentals of training.
To the nuances of race day prep.
And now we're going to move on to the final piece of the puzzle.
The final piece. Okay.
Nutrition.
Nutrition, the fuel that powers our performance. And it's important to remember this is really just the starting point.
Right.
You know, this deep dive is just a springboard for your own journey with this book.
I like that.
The Triathlete's Training Bible.
It gives us that foundation.
It does.
But now we need to take this knowledge and kind of apply it to our own unique training approach.
That's where the real magic happens.
So what advice does the book give for navigating this process?
Well, they really advocate for almost like a scientific approach.
Okay.
You know, treat your training like a series of experiments,
Okay.
document everything, analyze the results, and then you continually refine your approach based on what you learn.
So it's that continuous cycle.
Of learning and adaptation.
I like that.
And while the book provides a framework,
Right.
they also stress the importance of listening to your body.
Okay.
You know, paying attention to those signals.
Right, because sometimes we need to deviate from the plan.
Exactly. So it's about finding that balance between following the plan and making adjustments based on how you feel.
What else?
They also encourage seeking guidance from more experienced coaches and athletes.
Makes sense.
You know, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay.
Learn from those who have been there before.
It's a good reminder that the triathlon community
It is a community.
can be a valuable resource
Definitely.
anything else.
And above all, don't lose sight of the joy in the process.
Right.
Triathlon training is challenging,
It is.
but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely.
So celebrate your progress.
Embrace the setbacks.
Exactly. Savor the journey.
It's about finding that sweet spot between passion and discipline.
Beautifully said.
Well, I think we've thoroughly explored the depths of the Triathlete's Training Bible.
We have. It's been quite a journey.
This deep dive has given you a ton of information to help you tackle your own triathlon goals.
It has.
But remember,
What's that?
this is just the beginning.
It is.
Now go forth and conquer those races.
And have fun out there.
Absolutely.